Okay, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Sam Harvey from the Center for Career and Professional Development, and this is Coffee and Conversations interview prep. So as a general note, this is a current ongoing weekly webinar that we have. If you miss any of them, we do record them and post them up every week on our YouTube channel. The first one we did not end up doing that, but all the other ones since then are up there. So you can always look that up. I believe we are Pratt CCPP on YouTube. You can always email us or look on our website, and that is on the pratt.edu website. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about interview preparation. So I'm just going to kind of jump on in, go through things that for you to think about preparing. If you have questions, generally at the end, there's plenty of time for you to ask questions. These take 30 minutes at the most for me to get through my information, and then I'll hang around basically until questions stop after that. You can always, if you have questions along the way, you can type them into the chat field. It's just easier if you're muted throughout while I'm doing the presentation, just to avoid background noise. Okay, so interviewing is a really huge part of basically the entire job search process, and it's going to often come down to that you feel you're super prepared for this position. You might feel you're a correct fit, but the interview is really that chance for you to fully understand how that's going to work in the dynamics of the office. It really is about being able to talk to this employer, to ask them some questions to determine if you really want this position. It's also a chance for them to determine if you are actively qualified for this position. Really, it's kind of figuring out the right fit for the job. So do you have the necessary skills and qualifications to do the duties required? Are you enthusiastic about the position? That's definitely a huge thing, and I'll talk more about how you can show that later. Are you going to be able to contribute and have a positive impact in your role? And really, they're just looking to find someone that's going to fill the role as best possible and really fit into the dynamic that they're looking for. And as I said, it's also your chance to find out about the employer as well, a good chance to really see how they answer some of the questions you have, and I will, as I said, talk about that. So as far as interviews go, there's kind of a whole huge realm of different types of them. You could interview with people as far as where you're interviewing. It could be over the phone, it could be in person, it could be video chat, are kind of the main ways that happens. I can't really think of any other ways of communication. And you know, actually, some organizations today are, instead of having you actively being interviewing with a person, will have you more or less record a video of yourself answering questions. That's another version of this that I have seen. On top of that, as far as interview structures go, you could be doing one-on-one interviews. That's kind of the traditional, you're talking to a hiring manager, a direct supervisor, someone, and you might be doing a couple of those in a row. You may end up in what's not exactly a one-on-one, but you as one potential candidate talking to a group of people that you would be working with. And that's definitely a little bit more on the stressful side, I think, the more people that are involved in it. You might also end up in more of a group interview setting. I haven't seen this as much. I've never actively participated in one when there's a few candidates all at once there to talk. I did that as like a student for one or two positions, but not as much in the professional world. Some other types of interviews that you might get is what would be considered a competency interview. So this interview questions require you to give specific examples and to demonstrate skills and attitudes. So really this is about like, how would you solve this problem? If any of you have ever heard of kind of how you interview for Google, that would be an example of this, where they actively give you a problem and they want you to solve it. And it doesn't necessarily matter it doesn't necessarily matter what your outcome is, but they're really looking to see how you go about solving it. Do you kind of hit the skills and competencies they're looking for? There might also be a behavioral interview. So this is related to specific examples of your past experiences, and this is really trying to see how you might handle situations in the future. So if it's a really like hands-on to dealing with other people type of position, they might do more of a behavioral interview to figure out, well, how do you react in high stress situations, or how do you react if someone asks you the same question 20 times over? So that's really looking more at the like how you deal with certain things versus the competencies. Do you have skills? Most interviews that I've ever been is kind of a mix of the two where they're looking to get both information, and that's more the general one-on-one. Then there's also something that you may have heard about before called informational interviews. This is more of a way of you to just get some more information about a job, a career field, an industry, or a specific company. If you're interested in informational interviews, which isn't necessarily, hey, you have a job I want to know about, it's more, hey, I'm interested in learning more about what you do in some capacity. That's usually you would reach out for that type of thing. This isn't about getting a job offer, but really as a way of starting to get to know more. If you're a current student, this is a really great way to start figuring out what companies you might be interested in, especially if you're can get in contact with Pratt alumni. I've generally found Pratt alumni are thrilled to have conversations with people, with current students, especially about like the work that they're currently doing, especially if it will help guide someone in their career choices. Okay, so now I'm actually going to get into more of the preparing for an interview. So the interview is basically a chance for you to really talk about yourself and the work that you do and what makes you qualified for this position. You really need to know also about the employer as well. So this is a point where all of that research you've hopefully been doing about the company can really come in handy. Before you go into it, definitely look over the research again, just to make sure you understand their vision, message, goals, services, products, and projects. Really also, and if you've ever been in any of these things with me, the biggest thing that I will always stress is that you really want to make sure you understand why you want to work at this company. So some things that you're going to really want to make sure like you actively have on hand when you're walking into the office that day is copies of your resume. They might print them out and have them, they might not. I've been in both situations. It's always good to come prepared with copies of your resume, even if you're on a second or third interview and in previous ones they haven't needed you to provide a resume, still bring it in. Once more than that is also from personal experience of walking into a second level interview and them not actually having a printout available that they had printed themselves. Internet-free portfolio. So if you're doing a visual design position, you're going to end up spending time going over the work that you do in your portfolio. And I think we can always talk about portfolios if that's something you're interested in having more of a conversation with. We can talk about those. But really the big thing for the interview is that you need a portfolio that doesn't require that you have access to the internet. It might be that you get there and they have it pulled up on a computer, on a laptop, on something for you, and they pull up whatever you had sent them, whether it be a website or a PDF. But you don't want to go in there having to bring in your laptop and expecting to necessarily use their Wi-Fi. A lot of companies have it set up so that you be a specifically registered guest in order to use their Wi-Fi, and most people aren't going to just like let you log into the Wi-Fi. That's definitely for some of the bigger companies. Oftentimes you'll very easily be able to get on the Wi-Fi and it won't be an issue, but it's always really good to just have that backup ready. So that could be in the form of printouts that you did, hopefully nice quality printouts, and then you can just use it again for other interviews and later on. Or you can have your laptop, or I would say an iPad or some sort of tablet-sized thing loaded with the PDF just in the books area of it. I would definitely bring something bigger than a phone screen. You want to make sure that there's space for the work, but something like a regular iPad size is totally fine and makes it super easy to carry around if you don't want to carry a full laptop with you. I know at some point, yeah, you can have a digital copy on your laptop if that's the issue. You don't need to print it out. It's more of an if you just don't want to be carting around your laptop or your tablet, you might want to print it out. But yeah, a digital copy just as long as you don't need the Wi-Fi to get onto it. And it also makes it easier. And really, it's nice and clean that way also. And you can practice with that one. You also want to bring a notebook and a writing instrument. Bring it with you, pull it out, and even if you can't really find big things to take notes about, have there be some notes that maybe you took beforehand about the research that you've already done about this company, anything that you really wanted to mention, or as I'll go into any of your preparation for questions, that can be already on this page of this notebook, but this is also a chance for you to take notes. What are they saying? What are things that stand out as you're going through? Are there questions you have? Because at the end you will get that chance. So that's a really great moment to take note of any of that. Even if there's not a lot of things you can kind of see yourself wanting to write down, write something down throughout, because it really helps show. It's kind of that idea of just a behavioral thing of really extra showing you're engaged because, oh, I'm going to take a note about that thing, even if you really aren't taking awesome notes at the end. But it can be also, if you're trying to decide positions to get, a great time for you to have sort of what are some of the pinpoints that you're hoping that they talk about, what are some of the pros you're seeing right now, what are some of the cons that you're seeing right now. But just always having something there to be able to take your notes on is super important. So then the next thing is just how to dress. This can become just a little bit of I think, an interesting time because of the fact that most of us are working in creative environments and the dress code is not the same as if you were working in finance on Wall Street. The best thing I can really say for this is professional. Professional meaning kind of clean, so don't wear necessarily your paint-stained jeans, and professional, just something that you would wear to maybe dinner with your parents or something like that. It doesn't need to be that you're in a suit and tie if you're going to an office where you 100% know they don't wear shirts and ties, like jackets and ties, there we go. Dress for the type of job that you're used to, but just make sure it's clean and professional and still be you. Don't worry about having to like fully adjust your personal style as you're going in there. If there's someone that won't hire you because you have tattoos, it's probably not a workplace environment that you would actively be excited to be working at. That's just like things to keep in mind. And it's always okay to be dressed up slightly nicer than the people that you're interviewing with when you actually start working there. That'll probably change. No one expects that you're going to dress the same way you did on your interview. You're there to impress. So you can get there and then figure out the realm of it. But it's definitely better to go slightly fancier than you think that you should be rather than to show up looking messy in their eyes and have that happen. But really simple, clean, easy. Okay, so the actual part of what you can do for the act of interviewing is question prep. So there's a lot of common questions, and you can Google all of this that you can find that you can start to prepare. So some of the main things, tell us about yourself. That question isn't asking for your full life story. You don't need to reintroduce yourself. You don't need to go through your entire resume. What they're really looking for in tell us about yourself is to hear who are you right now, a little bit of how you ended up choosing this pathway perhaps, but also what are you looking to do? What are you passionate about? How would you describe yourself to someone asking about the work that you do? So it doesn't need to be, I guess in my case, like, oh, I grew up in Poughkeepsie, New York. I came to New York City in order to, like, you don't need to go through the full life story. It's more of a, well, I'm a career services professional. I've been doing this for X amount of years. I transitioned into this from here because if it's relevant, and that's it. It should all be things that you consider are relevant to this position and to this company that they're gonna care about. Some other big questions: what are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? For this, I definitely recommend having a couple of things listed down, as prepared as you're going to be because you've thought through these questions before. When you're sitting there in the interview session, there's going to be things that just fly out of your mind and you're like, cool, I don't remember that word anymore. How do I describe that? I know how to keep things in their proper places. Have a couple of words there. I'd say have 3 of each, but also have things to back it up. So if you're saying, well, one of my strengths is that I have really awesome organizational skills, don't just say that. Say, I have organizational skills, and this can be evident if you ever looked on my personal computer and saw the way that I keep all of my files in separate folders and really label everything. Have those sort of things that back it up, because everyone can say that they're organized, but what you have to back it up is the more interesting part. For weaknesses, the biggest thing that you'll probably hear to anyone that's giving you interview prep is interview advice is to kind of turn your weakness into a strength, and there is something to be said for that, but the big thing is also to be honest about your weaknesses. The kind of go-to general thing is, well, say you're a perfectionist and you can't get rid of it over your work. One, is that true for you? If that is actively true, cool, great, you can say it, but also the big thing with weaknesses is they can actually be a weakness. It shouldn't be your biggest weakness ever, but what's something you're currently working on? If it's that you aren't as great at collaboration and reaching out to other offices, in my case perhaps, then maybe it's, well, collaboration isn't something that I've ever been strong at, but I've been trying to push myself more to reach out to people in other offices in order to create more cross-departmental programming. So not just how are you weak, but what are you doing about it? What have you identified, and how are you working to better yourself? Why do you want to work here? As I said, that's something you really want to know. What interests you about the company? What interests you about this job? Something like that. As you're also thinking through, as you look through, either can go through a million other common interview questions. Why should we hire you? What do you know about this industry? What's your ideal working environment? What tools do you use to keep yourself organized? What's your proudest achievement? This goes on and on. You can Google these. But as you're looking and thinking about these, really the best thing is to really think about your values and specific examples you have of times that you really accomplished something that you're proud of and shown. And that's related to this industry. So writing a couple of these things down. If you really value having a collaborative work environment and having like good solid relationships with your coworkers, that's something you definitely want to make sure you write down. And at some point you're going to have a question where you can bring that up and talk about that as something that you're interested in. Examples they're going to ask about, as I said, strengths, weaknesses, but they're going to want to know about what are some of your accomplishments? What's a time when this happened? What's a time that everything went terribly wrong? And how were you able to handle that? Have a couple of those examples on hand so that you're not just always feeling like you have to go back to the same example. And that's the other big thing. Make sure you're varying your examples as you go through. You don't want to keep going back to the one same example, because it's always better to show a wider breadth of experience than just going back to one time that happened to be like you were awesome and everything went well. Show the breadth of some other things that you have done. But don't go back too far in your past is the other thing I would just warn against. You don't want to talk about something that happened 5 years ago if you have something that happened 2 years ago that is a little bit closer, a little bit more relevant. If you've been out of school for a couple of years, they don't necessarily want to hear as much about your in-school leadership experiences as they do your professional experiences. If you're a current student or graduated within the last year though, you can totally go into some things that you did as a student as well. So then the flip side of them asking you questions is the questions you have. Always come in and on that notepad you already have a couple of questions that you have for the company. Some things that can help you decide what are some questions you might want to ask, and you might end up going through and they answer some of these just in the process of you answering their questions. That's cool. Always ask questions though at the end. And this is why you want to have as much as possible kind of written down, and even ones that you know they can't just answer throughout. So things to consider is what isn't clear about the position. What are things that you're not quite sure what that's going to look like, who that might be reporting to? What aren't you as sure about? What do you want to know more about as far as the company, as far as the position? What is it that you feel like you really want a slightly deeper look into? And that can be really specific things of, cool, you said I'm going to get to work on this account. What does this account look like? Who are some of the people that maybe already work on that? What are some of the projects already happening within that? What does an average day look like? This is one thing that I found as far as creatives go, is the answer is always, well, there isn't just any average day. Every day is different. This is something you can prod about a little bit. You can say, well, cool, but like, does that mean I'm sitting on a computer working on slightly different things all day? Or does that mean I'm going to be maybe at my computer for a little bit, or I might be on a photo shoot? Like, try and poke a little bit more into that. And that could even be, well, what's your day look like the rest of the day? Or what does tell me some stuff that one of your other current people in an equivalent position might be doing today. And then project examples. So asking maybe what are some projects they might see you working on in the near future that could be coming up. What are maybe the priorities of this position? Oftentimes they're going to list a ton of things within the job description itself, but there's stuff in there that they're like, no, but we really, really, really want this person to really focus in on this. This is your chance to clarify that, because maybe you're really excited about one aspect of it, but they're actively looking for someone that's going to do a different aspect. And it's good for you to know that as you're making your decision, is you might end up being like, oh, so the thing I really liked is only like a third of the job versus the other thing is 2/3, and that's not something I really want to be doing. Some other possible questions you could ask: how do you generate assignments, and how do these assignments get assigned? What do you consider to be most important about this job? Do you meet regularly with your team? How do you communicate with your staff? What do you like working here the best? When can I expect to hear from you? Basically sort of general things that you can have kind of ready to go and think back to, because there's no way that they're going to answer every single question that you have in the course of the overall interview. So then post-interview, the real big thing is just following up. Make sure you get the contact info of everybody that you are interviewing with. I'll answer that question in 1 minute. But get the contact information, so get their card, get their email address. You'll probably have at least one person's email address that helped set up the interview in the first place, but if you can get everyone else's, then you can write specifically to them to talk about what you talked about versus saying, thank you, this generic person, and tell everybody else thank you, which is great for if it's a group interview. You don't need to get every individual's card, but if it's a one-on-one interview that you're doing maybe 3 that day, the more individual ones you can get, the better it is. The other option would be to have a letter or multiple letters basically ready to go. You want to have this ready basically to fill in after you walk out of the interview, maybe sit in their lobby for a second and just write a couple of key points and hand it to the front desk person to deliver to this person. This is a really great, quick way of being able to handle it. If you don't have it on hand then, the best thing to do will be to email them within 24 hours. While it's really nice to send the handwritten letter to them, if you can't get it to them like within 24 to 48 hours, it starts to kind of lose on its viability, just because a lot of times there can be quick turnaround and they're making pretty snap judgments about these things. And if not following up can make you be like, oh, well, this person doesn't care. And if they get it a month later, then it's like, oh, I guess they did, but we already decided to go with somebody else. But always follow up, and that's on phone conversations, even if it's your second interview, third interview, fifth interview. Always send a follow-up email, something about the specifics that you said, even if it's just, this has really helped me, this last interview really helped strengthen my interest in this company. I'm so excited to be working on X, Y, and Z. The same way your cover letter should be specific, your follow-up should be specific to the company that you're looking for. Okay. Cool. So I'm just going to go through some other tips, but I'll start first by answering the one question I have right now, which is it good to ask about the salary pay? That's very dependent on where you are in the interviewing process and what their interviewing plan is. So if you ask, what are the next steps? And they're like, well, we'll be letting people know in the next week, and that's it. Like, no other interviews. This is the only interview we're doing. At that point, you can go, that's awesome. I would love to know then about I would love to know a little bit more about the remuneration or the salary pay for this position at this time. If you're just doing a phone interview and you know there's going to be an in-person interview, that's not really the best time to ask it. It's after the first in-person that you would really want to go and ask about that. The biggest thing though with salary and the way that it works right now, which isn't necessarily something I personally support, is that you should wait for them to say the salary first, let them give you a number, because if you ask about it first, then there's lots of weird politics around salary. But I would say after the first in-person interview, it's okay to bring it up that you would like, if they haven't already let you know about that. Oftentimes they will let you know after the first in-person, they will email you. And that's something you can also follow up with on the email is, great, now that we're moving forward in this, am interested in hearing more about what the salary and benefits associated with this position would be. And then the general thing is just try and make them say a number first before you do. So then the next question I have, is it okay to keep a follow-up once they ask for it? I'm not sure what you mean by this question. Yeah, I'm not sure what you mean by keep a follow-up within that. But okay, I'm gonna go through my tips. If you can clarify that though, then I will hopefully be able to answer that. So really remember that people are hiring people. They're not looking necessarily just to hire your portfolio. So they might really like your portfolio. That might be the main reason that they're there. But you really need to sell in that interview yourself, your ability to make the work, and who you are as a person. The portfolio is what can help you really get in the door, but who you are is really what's going to help you actively get into that position. They're looking for someone that's going to fit into their team, that they're excited to work for. If you're just like, yep, here's my cool work, that's not exciting to them to see. They want to know more about their work. They want to know about the person that produces the work. Connect with the interview. So ask the interview about their specific role, how long they've been there. Get to know who that person is, because then they're going to know that you are connecting to them as a person, and that just makes it a little bit more personal. Be enthusiastic about the position, about the work that you're doing. Be excited about it. If you come in and you're very like one note, you're very like, yeah, I guess, then it doesn't feel like you're excited to be there. It's not going to feel like there. Okay. I will answer that question when I go to finish up the tips now. So yeah, as I said, you don't necessarily need to wear a suit. Be overdressed rather than underdressed. Each interviewer you talk to will also be different. So some like to drive the portfolio themselves. Some want to go through it that way. Others may want to go through it quickly and then look at back later. And some will let you walk you through it. You don't need to talk about each and every single piece. It's okay to skip around, but just kind of be ready to be agile in that area. And that's where it can be really good to have sort of your pieces prepared that you want them to, and that's why you send it to them for. They might go, cool, I really want to talk about this specific one. And then you'll talk about that one with them. Just kind of be agile about what they're gonna go through. And as I said, talk about the story behind your work, not just the finished piece. So while they do care about what the finished piece is, the story behind your work is the more important thing. They want to know about your process. How did you get there? What inspired you to make it this way? How did you pick these colors? Why this material? Really thinking through the specifics of it, not just like, cool, and here's my end piece. They really are looking for process. Sorry, I'm kind of looking through these and I hit some of these. Don't say negative things about past jobs you've had, past classmates, professors, any companies or clients. You want to keep it positive. Even if you're coming currently from like the worst position ever, don't spend your whole time being like, this place, because what that gives them the impression of is that you as an employee with them will also be unhappy. They aren't in your shoes. It might actively be the worst position ever, but to them it sounds like someone who maybe isn't fully enjoying the job, and not necessarily that it's an issue with the employer or with the professor. So, and also in the weird small world thing, they might know someone that works there. They might know the person you're actively talking about. So keep it positive, and if it's ever starting to hit on something that might be a negative area, find ways to try to at least find the good in the things that you're talking about there. Don't apologize for something being in your portfolio. Basically, defend the work that you decided to include. Don't apologize if you feel like there's a lack of missing skill sets. You're there, they've already decided that they like something about you. You have nothing to apologize for, just to go in there and kind of own the skill set that you have and let them know more about that. The interview is a two-way exchange. It's totally okay if this ends up turning into a conversation, but also, as I said, you need to feel comfortable asking questions as well. And feel free to go back and ask them to clarify a question that they asked. If you feel if it was a two-parter that was really long and you went on for a little bit and you forgot the second half, feel free to go, cool, don't feel that it needs to be a super like robotic sort of back and forth. And that I've already said. Okay, so the question that's clarification on that follow-up is, so they gave you two options for an interview date and you replied back and haven't received a reply. So should I be doing a follow-up? Yes. So this is a different follow-up scenario rather than this following up in an interview. The interview follow-up is a thank you that you send within 24 hours after every interview. This sort of follow-up is is following up about them trying to schedule an interview. If they gave you specific dates and you replied back, if it's about the day before or even the day of that, you should definitely go, hi, didn't receive a confirmation on this, wanted to know if we were still doing this time. If not, totally cool, I'm also free on these days. But always making sure you're giving them possible other options if the time has already passed that they originally gave you, or if it's today. And you can be like, cool, I never heard a follow back, so I'm assuming we're not meeting today. I would be free to meet later this week at these days. Let me know what works for you. If you're waiting for follow-ups, I would say generally a week between things if they're not concrete, but if it's trying to set a date and time, you can do it pretty much give it 2 days, I would say, between them, and then you can follow up always. Okay, and if you guys have questions, this is a great time to put it in. I have a couple other checklist things I can go through to kind of wrap this up, but yeah, feel free to ask any questions at this time. So yeah, this is just a general check, please. So do your research on the company. Select portfolio pieces and gear the presentation you're doing towards the audience while keeping true to the type of work that you want to do. So definitely make sure it's things they're going to care about, but don't worry about it. But make sure it's still work you're excited to be doing. Because if you're changing it that much for the company, it's probably not a company you actively want to work for. The handwritten thank you notes are appreciated and a considerate touch to have with you, and you can hand them to the person there and it's nice, but a well-written email with relevant details is also appreciated. So you don't need to worry about having to do the one. As long as you do one of the two, it's fine. Pay attention during the interview and ask relevant questions. Have perspective and be confident expressing your point of view. They're not necessarily looking for someone that's just going to nod back about everything that they like and like the same things as they do. Have a point of view, be yourself, own that. Know and to be able to be articulate about why you are in this creative field and what your active goals are for later on. So yes, right now you're looking for a full-time position, you're looking for a position, but where do you see yourself in 5 years? Where do you see yourself in 10 years? And look up the location in advance and be early. Definitely if it says 45 minutes, leave yourself an hour. This is New York City, you know how it works. Or even if you're not in New York City, try and be there at least 10 minutes early, I would say. That gives you time to maybe find a bathroom and give yourself a good breathing time. If you've ever done power poses, they can be super helpful for right before the interview. That's kind of like doing the Wonder Woman, hands on your hips thing. Great thing to do in the bathroom if you have some time before your interview. You also don't want to be rushing in there, and if you're early, that gives the interviewer time to prepare versus if it's 1 o'clock and you are supposed to be there at 1 o'clock, and at 1 o'clock you're walking in and at 1:01 they're getting the call. It just starts to feel like, oh, okay, cool, this person's just on time. Okay, that's all I have. I'm gonna mute myself, but if you have questions, feel free to pop them in the chat. If you aren't on a computer and the phone is the best thing, you can do that. Oh, if they ask about your previous salary, should I share and how to respond to that? So there's a weird thing right now happening with the law, so I'm not officially sure. I think in New York City, at least, I'm not sure if it's all of New York State, they're not really supposed to ask you about previous salaries anymore. So definitely look in where you are and what the current law is about that. But you can, don't say more than you necessarily made, but you can round it at least a little bit, round it up a little bit, but you can also say within that. There's a lot of issues around the salary thing. If you could tell them you don't prefer to answer that and they'll take that how they take it. It's kind of a do what you're most comfortable with. That's it. There's not a great answer for previous salary. I'd say the better one is, what is your required salary? And what you could say, well, I was making this much, but I'm really looking to be making closer to this much because of XY cost of living, because the work I'd be doing is different. But definitely look up what the current legal thing is in wherever it is this employer is located.